Welcome to the Earn More, Stress Less podcast with me, Caro Sison. This podcast is for self-employed business owners just like you, who really want to grow their business and become successful and profitable, but without all the stress and hassle. I want to share my 30 years of business experience to show you how simple it can be to earn more money and how you can get organised without needing a business degree or any other qualifications. I'll be talking about the easy steps that you can put in place right now to start earning more money today and to help you get the business that you deserve and dream of. Without further ado, let's get started. This week's podcast is sponsored by Pocket PA, helping self-employed business owners to get organised, understand their finances and do their accounts all in one place using a powerful online tool. If you're serious about making a profit and having a successful business, then using a simple digital web app like Pocket PA is the best way to grow and scale your business. Visit pocketpa.com for more details and start managing your money like a pro today. Hello and welcome to the Earn More, Stress Less podcast with me, Caro Sison. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm talking to Charlotte Carter, a global high-performance coach who works with entrepreneurs and leaders to celebrate their brilliance through high performance. She does this through conscious and subconscious reprogramming of the mind, beliefs and stories so that they can stop feeling stuck and stagnant and ditch the limits and step into their best life yet. So, Charlotte, hello. Welcome to this week's podcast. How are you?
I'm really good, and thank you ever so much for having me. I know we've tried to get this one in the diary for a little while, so I'm really pleased that we managed to pull it out of the bag.
Yeah, so am I. Yes, so am I. So conscious and subconscious reprogramming of the mind. Now that is powerful stuff. Tell me more.
It's a big statement, isn't it? It's a big claim there.
That is.
So your mind, if people like your listeners are new to this concept, your mind is built up on many, many things, but 95% of your mind is subconscious. So we don't even know what's going on. We just live our life with 5% in this conscious world. So everything we do, we think about, all our behaviors are all within this 5%. So all of our stories of what stops us doing things or what makes us feel in a certain way, they're stuck in our subconscious. So I do work with people to unpick that so that you get a lot of clarity and a lot of space, so then you can get all the good stuff into the conscious side.
That is so crazy to think that 95% of what we're doing is subconscious, isn't it? Because I think we do these days just run on autopilot, don't you think? We are so busy that we have to rely on that autopilot to just keep us functioning.
And it's so interesting when you start looking at some of the science behind it, because half of our life is built on subconscious habits. So about 1 of every 2 minutes, you're doing something that you're not even aware that you're doing, because that's how we've built our life and that's how we've built our everything that we do. You know, I always talk about the journey when you drive somewhere, if you're a driver or if you're a passenger and you go from A to B and you're at B and I can't even remember how I got here.
That's the scary part, isn't it? Because so many things have happened in that interim 20 minutes or whatever. You've had a whole load of brain thoughts and you've been thinking of other things and yet you've got there safely. But goodness, how much attention were you actually paying? But you become so aware and competent in your ability to drive, but it sort of hits into that subconscious, doesn't it?
Yeah, it hits into it so that it's like just a natural habit. But if you think about, and my son's learning to drive at the moment, and all of the things he's got to learn. And when you're first learning something, there's so much to learn. But if you sort of look at that analogy of then your business, actually, once you've learned stuff and you've got it in your subconscious mind, then you can get from A to B quite easily with some of the foundational stuff.
Either want to unpick or they want to build on things that they want to do better and sort of improve in their lives. Is that what you're saying? Is that your general thing that you're doing each day?
Yeah, so generally people find themselves stuck or stagnant in where they are in their life or their business or their health or their relationships. I work with people on many things and they can't quite see how they're going to get out of it themselves. So I don't want to do this. I don't want to procrastinate. I don't want to feel lonely. I don't want to feel all of the things that they're feeling, but they're not quite sure how to embed the stuff that they really want. And sometimes you can't get to where you want to go until you unpick what's holding you back.
So what sort of techniques or tricks do you use to get started with somebody that might want to change a habit or a pattern or to move into something more positive?
So the first thing I'd ask people is, what's your big dream? So what's your big dream? What's the big dream? And then I ask them to dream bigger. Because what happens with the mind is you dream big and you go like, well, I'd quite like this, but you already start limiting yourself, and I'm not sure about this, and maybe if I'd be a show off, and all your stories start coming out. And then I ask them to dream even bigger, something that's going to really, what I talk about, blowing your mind. Because when you can get yourself in a place where you like really blow your mind, your first thought of the dreaming big feels more achievable, because you're like, well, actually that would blow my mind, so this first just dreaming big will actually be easier. So what I do is I get people to think like that, and they start thinking about what are the reasons why they're not there. And that's when we start to look at the stories, and they're usually things like people's self-doubt, people's belief in themselves, people's worry, people's judgment from other people, and they start to unpick why they're not there. And there's lots and lots and lots of work that I do with people around judgment. And once you start looking at why you're not there, then you can start looking at how you can counteract that. So you can start looking at your limiting beliefs and the stories that you tell yourself of why you're not there, and then reframe them and tap into them and make them your empowering beliefs of why you can get there, and what are the reasons and what are the steps that you need to do to be able to get there.
That's so interesting. And are there common themes about what hold people back and what create these limiting beliefs? Because I'm sure there must be some common strands and threads that go through all of the things that you see with the number of people that you speak to.
Yeah, there's sort of like three main fears that people have. And it'd be interesting for people, if they're listening along, to just see which one jumps out. You can have all three, but these are the three that I find that people fit into one of these three more than the others. So there's fear of success. So people have a huge fear of, what if it actually goes well? And then who will I be? And then what will happen? And then what will I lose? And then what will happen in terms of all sorts of things? So a fear of success. So they stop themselves doing something, even though they're hugely capable, because this fear of success is holding them back. That's possibly the most popular. Then fear of failure. This is where there's like 87% of entrepreneurs have this not good enough thread. So they have a not good enough thread that I totally admit to having, that I've worked on myself. And that is like, well, it's not going to be good enough, so I'm going to fail, so I'm just not going to try. So a lot of people fall into that pattern of, I'm not going to give it my best shot because I don't think it's going to work. It's not for me. It's for everybody else. And I haven't got the skills. I haven't got the knowledge. I'm not good enough. And that's the fear of failure thread that I see with a lot of people. And then the third one, which I'm seeing more and more of with more established people, to be fair, is the fear of judgment. So people, judgment of either themselves. Some people have a real harsh, what I call inner critic. Their inner voice is really mean to them. So they judge themselves, so they stop themselves doing things. Or some people are very, very fearful of what anybody else might think or say about what they do. So then they don't do it. So they're the three ones. And I think if people are listening, just take a moment to see which one jumps out for you, because you can have all three, but there'll be one that's more prevalent for you.
I find the fear of success one fascinating because, who wouldn't want to be successful? Isn't that what everybody's ambition is, to have more success, more happiness, more wealth, more success in their business, that sort of thing? So it's bizarre that they have this fear, this subconscious fear of that success, and that could be holding them back, because I would have thought that it was a natural thing that everybody would want to move towards that place, but a fear could actually block that.
Yeah, because lots of people have like a limiting belief that they don't want to be a show off. It's quite a common limiting belief. I don't want to be a show off. I don't want to be too big for my boots. I never want to be arrogant. So sometimes people limit themselves subconsciously about this fear of success. Well, these people may not like me, and I don't know where I'm going to belong.
Do you think that that's a cultural or a country type fear that we have in the UK, because we are a little different and quite reserved? Do you work with any international folk that maybe are based in the US, where they are much more outgoing, much more comfortable with blowing their own trumpet, whereas in the UK we are much more reserved and we have that quiet voice, and it's like, oh, I don't want to seem too loud, too brash, or too arrogant, and I'm too out there, my ego's too large? Do you think that there's a difference in these cultures and countries?
Yeah, I do. I think I've got clients in Switzerland, the States. I've had clients all over the place, to be fair, and they all bring their own different, unique belief system, to be fair. But definitely, the UK is much more reserved. So especially if you've got your own business, you've got to be able to sell your services. whatever they are, you've got to be able to stand and back yourself. So you've got to be able to stand above the people who haven't got their own businesses, because you're in a position where you're selling everything that you stand for. And so it's important to be able to navigate the beliefs that may hold you back. But yeah, fear of success is quite big.
And the last one that you mentioned, I think certainly the fear of being visible. We have to have a much more visible presence these days, particularly with online social media. That's something that I've struggled enormously with over the last 12 months, is coming out from behind the camera, for allowing people to be able to see me, hear my voice, doing my podcast. This is like a huge step for me, having started my podcast a year ago. I would never have dreamt. I would have loved to have been a guest on somebody's, but to think that I could potentially have my own and have something that I put out every week, and people could hear my voice and, hear my hiccups and my faults and my stumbles, all of those sorts of things, when you're trying to run what I always thought was a credible business, where, the less people saw of you, the less exposed you might be, the less vulnerable to them seeing your mistakes, those sorts of things. So being visible was a huge one for me, to even just have my voice shared, come out from behind the camera. And I certainly had to start with a filter, because it felt like it was a protection from me and the world, to be able to see all of my flaws and my skin and all of those sorts of things that I felt self-conscious about. But I think it's very important now for people to recognize that they don't have to do that alone, and build that confidence and take those steps. There is support to be able to help them become more visible, with coaches like yourself. And
I think it's so interesting, the sort of judgment and visibility, because so much of it is just an inner job. Because sometimes people's stories are that they've forever been told, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. So they want to hide themselves. But so much is still the person's inside view of themselves, which is where I do a lot of the work. And sometimes it's mirror work, just looking in the mirror and being able to appreciate who you are, what you stand for, and to acknowledge really that everybody has light and dark of their personality, and everybody has things that they really excel at and things that they struggle at. And I think sometimes people see all of their struggles, and what I work with people on is, you've got to see your struggles, but you've also got to see what you're really good at, and then just navigate the bridge to step into your brilliance, which is what I work with people on. But yeah, visibility, it's one of those things where you can build your momentum. And I think it's finding what I call your rhythm of life is really important. So finding what visibility means for you. So whether it's once a week, whether it's once a day, whether it's on 2 platforms or 5 platforms, whether it's emails, whatever it is for you. And when you find what resonates with you, it's easier to stick to it. I think so many people try to do so many different arms that just don't fit with them, that then it's overwhelming, and then they just don't know where to start. And then it all comes, a little bit crashing down for some people.
Yeah. And that whole self-consciousness piece of being self-conscious of people seeing you, I think we just need to wind our necks back in and just remember that people are only really bothered about themselves, and, they see people on the periphery of their life. But I know if you perhaps go to a new gym or something like that, you feel very self-conscious that, oh my goodness, everybody's going to be looking at me, and I'm going to walk in the door and everybody will turn around and look at me. When in fact, that's absolutely not the case. Everybody's worrying about their own little bubble and what they look like inside themselves. They notice that somebody else has walked in, but they're not looking at your trainers, or what top you've got on, or how you got your hair, and if you've worn makeup, all those sorts of things that we bother and concern ourselves with on being visible when we are self-conscious. The 95% of those things are not even noticed by the majority of the people, which is just bizarre that we spend all of this time obsessing and focusing on the wrong thing, really.
And I think sometimes it's about being able to have a laugh with yourself, and being able to start to see, and having a word with yourself, these are just thoughts in your head if they're holding you back, and being able to navigate them. For example, I remember when I did a gym class and I had my top on inside out the whole time, and I was in the gym class, there were probably 20 odd people in there. I came out and I was like, I can't believe I have my top on inside out. And like you say, nobody had said, by the way, you've got your top on inside out. People probably hadn't even noticed, or if they had, they'd probably gone, oh my goodness, how awful if they've got the top on. And nobody had said to me. But it's like that, and then it was just making that into a joke of, have you ever done this? Have you ever put your top on? Because nobody is bothered, nobody's even said anything. But it's how you reframe things like that. And I think visibility is a big part of people's journeys. in terms of their version of success.
Yeah, and I think it is definitely more so because of in your business, when you're working for yourself by yourself, you don't have other people to perhaps bounce that perspective off. So particularly if you're a solo business owner and you are needing to perhaps put yourself out onto social media, you don't have someone else to chat about it with, them to dispel your worries and your fears and things. So you build it up to be quite a large event, and then it becomes bigger and bigger in your head, and you don't have anyone as a sounding board perhaps that's in your space, because just by the very nature of being self-employed, it can be quite a lonely process. So what would you suggest are the steps for those people that are working by themselves? They do need to show up on social media or perhaps engage it a little bit more. Do you suggest just getting started with small steps on that visibility ladder to be able to get them going?
Yeah, I'd pick like one or two ways that you like to be visible. First of all, just break it right down. So in terms of growing your brand or growing your business or growing your presence, you can do it in so many different ways. Podcast is a great one. You can do it on email. You can do it on all of the social media platforms. You can do it by going in other people's audiences. Find one or two that you like doing, because so much of like building a strong business is getting your energy right and getting in the flow of doing what you like doing. Because if you're doing something that you don't really want to be doing at all, then it's going to feel like pushing mud uphill all of the time. So always just take a little bit of time to think, okay, well, actually, I really like, so I'm quite used to going live, so I do that quite a lot. It's quite easy for me and I'm natural to do it. But some people, that would definitely not be their thing. Some people like writing.
That would terrify the pants off me, Charlotte.
Yeah.
That sort of whole idea. I did a live last week with an amazing lady, Frances, and she took control. It was her live. So I was just showing up and she was talking with me, and that felt totally safe. And I thought afterwards, gosh, I could actually do more of those. But it might sound really weird that I have that fear when I've got my own podcast, but my own podcast is a safe environment and I have my guests on and I get to chat. I don't like the solo episodes or the solo showing up, whereas for you, you excel in that environment. And it's interesting how different people are. But you're totally right. When it's your business, it's important you find things that suit you, because you're not having to please anyone else. This is for you that you're doing all of these things.
And I think it's easier to find your momentum and your rhythm when you know you like doing it. So like you found a great thing in your podcast. You've had to work yourself up to being able to do it. Like you said, you might not have done it a year ago, but now you're in a place where you're finding your rhythm and it's working for you. So I'd say to anybody listening, think about what are those things that you like doing. Do you like writing copy? So one of my clients likes writing copy. So she writes loads of blogs for a website. So she spends a lot of time on her SEO and that kind of thing. Think about what you like doing that doesn't necessarily mean that you're showing your face and all those things. And then get in a rhythm in your week, okay, and get intentional. Because I think what happens with solo business owners, there's nobody to answer to, and there's no deadlines, and there's no, if you don't do it, then who's going to notice? And it's very easy to hide away, and it's very easy to put things off until next week, next month, next year. And I think once you can be intentional with your time and look at your week and go, okay, I'm going to write a long copy post, I'm going to go live here, and I'm going to try and see if I can speak on somebody else's podcast. And just think like that and just get intentional with it, and then try to find your own rhythm and build it into your routine. Don't overwhelm yourself.
Because when you are working for yourself, there isn't anyone else to be accountable for. So without having an accountability partner, things can easily slip and slide. Just as there's no one always to perhaps share the good times and the excitement, when you are perhaps having not such a good time with, that's the time you also don't have anyone to share those dips with either. So it's important that you have these milestones, I guess, for sort of planning out how you're going to create these visibility moments and stuff. Which sort of clients do you love to work with, Charlotte? Who would be your sort of favorite type of client? What lights you up?
I work with lots and lots of different types of people, which is part of what I like, what I do. But I'd say that the kind of ideal people that I love working with are people that feel like they have not necessarily been seen or heard. So they've either had a childhood or a lifestyle where they've just made do. So they've been looking after everybody else, or they've never really been shown their true self. So they've always lived a life of a version of themselves, never really stepped into their brilliance. So they're the people that know they're made for more, in that kind of cliche phrase, but have never really been seen or heard. And they're the people that I love working with, because I see them in a very different way, because one of my biggest strengths, what I work with people on, is their strengths. And one of my biggest strengths is futuristic. So I can see where people are going. I can see what it is that they need to do and how they can get there and how I can help them and how they can help themselves.
And is it a long process to make these changes, or do you see some quick wins?
Super quick wins. So I have a 30-day program called High Performance Kickstart. And some people make quick wins within 2 weeks of building habits. Some people within one session, will make life-changing decisions. Some people are very slow burners, because that's their pace. And I think so much in coaching, and one of the things I've learned is that everybody works at a different pace. So I work at a very fast pace. Some people will work at, a much, much slower pace, and that's fine for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that you've done some work with Nick Pigeon with your positive psychology. Is that something that you've brought into another sort of string to your bow? Could you just explain a little bit about what that entails and how that's enhanced what your coaching offers?
Yeah. So I was one of the first 20 that trained with Nick Pigeon. She was my mentor. I was in a mastermind with her. She's fabulous. If anybody hasn't heard of her, she's a sales coach and mentor based in the States.
But she's English. She's from Newcastle, isn't she?
She is from Newcastle, yeah.
It's Nick as in Niyc, isn't it? It's not. It's an unusual spelling. Yeah, Nick Pigeon. Yeah. Amazing girl.
Yeah, and she's brought out what's called PPCA, so Positive Psychology Coaching Academy. And she trains people all over the world. And I was one of the first 20 that got trained in the first cohort. And what positive psychology is the science of well-being. So whereas psychology was looking at what kind of went wrong with people or where people wanted to be fixed, is a typical definition for psychology. Positive psychology is what's going well for people and what are people's strengths, and where are things that people excel at, and where can we do more of that, and where can we allow people to shine, and those kind of things. And it fits in very, very well with my business, because I work on people finding their brilliance, which is about their purpose, their passion, everything they stand for, their values, their strengths, and everything that they are really, really good at, and then just excel at. And being able to do the subconscious work, I can remove the stuff that's holding people back, or the limitations, and then they can step into excelling. Yeah, and positive psychology runs through all of my programs.
That's amazing. And can I just ask a quick question? So confidence and self-esteem, are these the one and the same? Are they two different things? And if they're different, what is the difference?
Oh, that's a good question.
Do people use them interchangeably, or what do you think is the difference, if there is any difference, between self-esteem?
I think they're two different things, because I think what happens is self-esteem is wholly you. So it's how you feel about yourself. So if people have low self-esteem, they may feel low self-worth. They may feel a little bit hopeless, a little bit overwhelmed. If they have high self-esteem, they feel like they can conquer the world. So your self-esteem is all about you as a person. Confidence is something that can be like segmented into different areas of your life, because some people can be very, very confident at one particular aspect of their life and yet very unconfident in something completely different. And I think some people have this sort of like illusion of, well, I'm just not a confident person. And I really have a lot of these conversations saying, well, just tell me why and when you were super confident, and tell me why and when you weren't. And people kind of get it mixed up, whereas self-esteem is wholly a person, confidence is areas of your life. And what I would talk about with confidence is everything that you do in your life was new once, absolutely everything. So there will have been fear, there will have been a lack of confidence, because it's brand new. And you have built your confidence up by repeatedly doing things, or repeatedly trying things, or building yourself up as well, or by other people, borrowing other people's confidence and belief in you. And I think your self-esteem comes totally from within you.
So confidence could almost be linked more with competence. So as you become competent at something, it generates more confidence. And whilst you might be competent and confident in one aspect, either of your work or your social life, etc., it might not sort of tally up with another area of your life. So you may be confident in one aspect and unconfident in another because you lack competence. Is that how you could describe that?
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. That's a good way. And I think it's also this is where the judgment and the perception comes in. So for example, I stood on stage a few weeks ago. Now to me, I'm fairly confident with that. It's fairly easy for me. I would say I am competent at it. If you ask me to do something, say like cook some super healthy meals, I'm not a great cook, and I know it's good for me, and I know it's something that I need to do, and I need to build my confidence in it. But I would say that it doesn't affect everything that I am. I think it's important to realize when it works for you and when it's okay to go, it's all right if I'm not that great at that. Because some people put this pressure on themselves, and I see this so much with high performers. I've got to be confident and brilliant at everything. I've got to have nailed everything that I'm doing, and I've got to be competent in everything that I do.
And how would you define a high performer? What's the opposite of a high performer? A low performer? What does sort of differentiates people between whether they're classified, or who classifies them as a high performer or a low performer?
So I'm a high performance coach, but I use it very differently to other people. So some people, as a high performance coach, will work with high performers in that these are people that are high achievers. So academically or wherever they've put their attention, they have achieved very high standards or whatever it is they've done. I look at high performance in that when people are in their strengths, then they can excel. So it's not, so they don't necessarily have to be see themselves as a high achiever. They just have to be able to know who they are, what they stand for, what they're really good at, and then step into that space. Because when you can step into what you're really good at, everybody's a high performer.
So you don't have to be a high performer to actually get started with you. You could be an underachiever perhaps, and you could still work with you to head towards that high performance goal.
Yeah, because I'm very much finding the high performance for you.
Okay.
So it's about finding your version of high performance. So for everybody that I work with, there's an element of working out who you are. So your high performance identity.
Yes.
Who are you? What do you stand for? What are your values? How you show up? And then what do we need to do to build your business around it? Or what do we need to do on your health or your relationships? And how's it going to boost you so that you actually feel good more of the time?
Yeah, I don't want anyone to think that if they don't see themselves as a high performer, that they wouldn't suit your client group to work with you, because that's something that will come once they start working with you. So it's because that's where they're wanting to head, is my understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things that distinguishes what I do. I don't distinguish that I'm going to work with people who are high flyers and high achievers. I will work with anyone that is willing to look at what's holding them back and step into what they want to do.
Perfect. And you've had a squiggly journey into self-employment, I would imagine, like the rest of us. Could you just give us a little synopsis? I probably should have asked all of this at the beginning, but I'm doing it back to front as usual. So please just tell us, Charlotte.
That's fine. So I worked for years in mental health. I had a bit of a aha moment when I was going to an all-women's running group, and I was like, there's more for life. There's more for me. I'm going to try and do something different. And I remember going to that event, walking back, doing a bit more training, and I set my business up there. It was one day that totally changed my whole life. And I'm super grateful for it. And I think sometimes it's looking outside of the box and looking at other things, and just, if something grasps your attention and your passion, you've got to go with it.
And what happened that day in your running group?
So it was a volunteer running group, and I remember going, and I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know how I was going to introduce myself. And it was the moment where I was like, I don't know who I am. I've lost sight of who I am. I went there. They were all good fun. These women were all really great fun. And it was like, none of these women are bothered about what anybody looks like, what anybody's doing, anything other than having a bit of fun and getting themselves a bit fit. And I think that was the start of my whole change in my self-employment journey, for certain.
That's amazing. And I think that's a blueprint for runners. We just don't care what we look like when we go running. If you've ever seen a lady running along the road, majority of them just don't care.
Yeah, and it's such a free space to be in. It's a real free space to be in. And I think when you're helping, I did that for nearly 3 years, when you're helping women in that space, or anyone in a space like that, it allows people to just really be seen for who they are, and none of the other, and it's all good. They all feel good.
I think that's a big misconception when you join a running group, that you expect to have to be able to run a marathon. You absolutely don't. There is a level for everyone. And I know when I started running, I had to take a personal trainer on for 6 weeks because my goal was to run 1 mile without stopping. And that just sounds ridiculous now, but it literally took me 6 weeks. I'd never run. I was like 30, I don't know, I was 30, 33 or whatever at the age. And I hadn't ever run a mile without stopping. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I'll never manage that without a personal trainer. And I took someone on, and it did literally take 6 weeks, and it was just going super, super slow and just past a puffathon speed. But the sense of achievement that I got after it, I mean, I looked as red as a beetroot for the next 2 hours, but it was just awesome. And it just gave a whole flood of endorphins, which I can't recommend thoroughly enough. High on life is the greatest place to be. But running is something that's free, easy, just put some trainers on and out you go, and just put some headphones in and then you feel that you're invisible. Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing all of that with us today. And if our listeners would like to find out more about you and to connect, where is the best place that they can find you?
It's probably best places over on Instagram. So I'm Charlotte_high performance coach over on there. And I give tips and tricks, and that's where you'll find out more about what I do.
Thank you. Great. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful week ahead, earn lots of lovely money with the least amount of stress, and I will catch up with you again next week. Thanks for listening to the Earn More, Stress Less podcast with me, Caro Sison. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then do hit subscribe so we can catch up again soon. And please kindly leave a review if you've got a moment, and share with anyone else that you think this podcast could help on their self-employed journey. If you're ready to make bigger breakthroughs in your business life and want to get way more organised and understand your finances the really simple way, then start your very own 14-day free trial today using the super powerful software tool Pocket PA that I made for my own son and daughter. Go to pocketpa.com/podcast and let's get you on the way to earning more money and stressing much less. Have a great week, whatever you're doing.